Geography is a harsh master. It does not care for international treaties, moral declarations, or the perceived rules-based order of distant superpowers. In the cold calculus of global power, geography is the ultimate weapon, and nowhere is this more apparent than the 1-mile-wide jugular of the global economy, the Strait of Hormuz. For decades, the world has lived in fear of Iran closing the gate. But Tehran has realized a much more lethal strategy. They don't need to close the gate to win. They just need to own it. By moving to charge a passage fee for ships traversing this vital choke point, Iran and Oman are not merely seeking a new revenue stream, they are executing a masterstroke of geopolitical engineering. They are weaponizing the very map itself to dismantle American maritime primacy and rewrite the laws of the sea through a fait accompli. This is not a policy change. This is the construction of a strategic wall across the most important waterway on Earth. The Strait of Hormuz is the world's most critical oil transit choke point. Through this narrow corridor, more than 20 million barrels of oil flow every single day. That is roughly 1/5 of global liquid petroleum consumption. It is the lifeblood of the industrialized world, the fuel for the factories of East Asia, and the backbone of the global energy market. Until now, the Strait has operated under the principle of transit passage, a concept codified in the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. This principle ensures that ships can pass through international straits even if they overlap with the territorial waters of coastal states. It is the legal foundation upon which the U.S. Navy justifies its presence and its protection of global trade, but Iran is now signaling that the era of free transit is over. By asserting the right to charge for passage, Tehran is declaring that these waters are not a global commons. They are sovereign territory. And in the world of hard realism, sovereignty is only as real as your ability to enforce it. Look at the map and you will see the brutal reality of the Iranian position. The northern coast of the strait is entirely controlled by Iran. The southern coast is controlled by Oman. The shipping lanes, dictated by the depth of the water and the presence of islands, often hug the Iranian shoreline. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy has spent decades turning this coastline into a fortress. They have thousands of anti-ship cruise missiles, swarms of fast attack craft, and sophisticated naval mines. They possess the high ground. When Iran and Oman decide to coordinate on a passage fee, they are not asking for permission. They are presenting the world with a new reality. They are saying that if you want to use the road, you must pay the toll. For the United States, this is a direct challenge to the very essence of its global role as the guarantor of the freedom of the seas. If Washington cannot keep the Strait of Hormuz free of administrative interference, its claim to global naval hegemony is effectively dead. The genius of this move lies in its subtlety. A physical blockade, a line of ships, or a field of mines is a kinetic act of war. It invites a kinetic response. It triggers the deployment of carrier strike groups and massive retaliatory strikes. But a service fee, an environmental protection tax, that is an administrative act. It is a slow-motion strangulation of the existing order. By framing this as a sovereign right to manage their own waters, Iran and Oman are moving the conflict from the realm of naval combat to the realm of international law and insurance premiums. This is a low-cost, high-leverage offensive. It forces the West into a dilemma. Do you go to war over a transit tax, or do you pay the fee? And in doing so, recognize Iran's de facto control over the strait. Either way, the old status quo is shattered. The immediate impact will be felt not in the halls of the Pentagon, but in the offices of insurance underwriters in London. The global shipping industry operates on the calculation of risk. If Iran begins to seize ships that refuse to pay the passage fee, insurance premiums for the Strait of Hormuz will skyrocket. For many shipping companies, paying a few $1,000s in Iranian taxes will be far cheaper than paying millions in increased insurance costs or risking the total loss of a vessel. Once the first few shipping giants comply, the precedent is set. The tax becomes a standard cost of doing business. This is how the rules-based order dies, not with a bang, but with a ledger entry. Iran knows that the commercial world is pragmatic. They are betting that the global market will choose to pay the toll rather than fight the war. As the first ships begin to comply, the strategic balance of power in the Middle East will undergo a tectonic shift. For decades, the U.S. Fifth Fleet has been the undisputed arbiter of the Persian Gulf. But the Fifth Fleet is designed to fight a navy, not to fight a bureaucracy. If the U.S. Navy begins to escort merchant vessels to help them evade the toll, it risks direct confrontation with Iranian forces in their own backyard. Iran enjoys strategic depth and the advantage of proximity. They can escalate at a time and place of their choosing, using asymmetric tools like drones and electronic warfare to make the cost of protection unbearable for the Americans. Washington would find itself in the impossible position of having to protect every single tanker 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, against an adversary that can strike from any point along 1,000 miles of coastline. This is a logistical nightmare that even the world's most powerful Navy cannot sustain indefinitely. The role of Oman in this equation is the most significant indicator of the changing tides. Oman has historically functioned as a neutral bridge between Iran and the West. If Muscat is now aligning with Tehran on the issue of passage fees, it means they have calculated that the American era in the region is fading. They are looking at the map and realizing that while the Americans are transient, Iran is permanent. By joining Iran in this move, Oman is helping to close the pincer. The strait is no longer a contested space between a pro-Western state and a revolutionary power. It is becoming a unified zone of control. This cooperation effectively shuts the door on any easy diplomatic or military solutions for the West. It presents a united front that claims to represent regional stability and environmental stewardship, making it even harder for the international community to mount a coherent opposition. As the toll becomes a reality, the logic of escalation will shift. Iran will not stop at a simple fee. Once they have established the right to regulate traffic, they will begin to use that power for political coercion. They will determine which ships are safe to pass and which are not. They will create fast lanes for their allies, Russia and China, while subjecting Western-linked vessels to rigorous environmental inspections and administrative delays. They will have a real-time database of every single barrel of oil leaving the Gulf and every ton of cargo entering it. This is the ultimate intelligence-gathering tool and the ultimate economic lever. Iran will be able to punish its enemies and reward its friends without ever firing a shot. They will have achieved what every great power dreams of, the ability to exert total control over a strategic asset through sheer institutional presence. For China and India, the primary consumers of Gulf oil, this new reality will be met with a cold, realist pragmatism. Beijing has no interest in defending the American-led maritime order. In fact, anything that undermines U.S. hegemony is a net gain for the Middle Kingdom. China will likely be the first to negotiate a favorable rate with Tehran, further binding the two nations together in a strategic partnership. This will leave the United States and its European allies isolated, fighting for a principal freedom of navigation that the rest of the world is willing to trade away for a discount on their energy bills. The cost of resisting the Iranian toll will fall disproportionately on the West, while the benefits of the new system will flow toward the East. This is not just a regional issue, it is a realignment of the global power structure. The strategic pivot will occur when the U.S. is forced to decide whether to use force to prevent the collection of these fees. If Washington chooses to strike Iranian naval assets to clear the lanes, it risks a total regional conflagration. Iran's response would not be limited to the Strait. They would activate their network of proxies in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. They would target U.S. bases throughout the region with missile salvos. They would use their A2, AD, anti-access, area denial capabilities to turn the entire Persian Gulf into a death trap for surface ships. The cost of oil would not just rise, it would vanish from the market as shipping lanes became active war zones. The global economy, still fragile and interconnected, would face a shock unlike anything seen since the 1930s. The U.S., public, weary of forever wars in the Middle East, would have little appetite for a conflict sparked by a maritime tax dispute. But if the United States does nothing, the consequences are equally grave. An American failure to act would be the final nail in the coffin of the Blue Water Doctrine that has defined U.S. power since 1945. If the world superpower cannot keep the most important choke point on the planet free from the administrative control of a regional power, then its security guarantees are worthless. From the South China Sea to the Baltic, other regional powers will take note. They will see that geography and resolve can defeat technology and tradition. They will begin to assert their own service fees and sovereign regulations over other vital waterways. The global ocean, once a single unified space for trade, will fragment into a series of guarded ponds controlled by local hegemons. The era of globalization founded on the security of the seas will effectively end. We are witnessing the birth of a new form of warfare, the war of the ledger. Iran is demonstrating that in the 21st century, you don't need to win a naval battle to control the sea. You just need to make it too expensive, too litigious, and too risky for your opponent to maintain their presence. They are playing a long game, leveraging their geographic depth and their endurance against a superpower that is increasingly overextended and distracted. This move to charge for passage is a test of will. It is a probe into the heart of the American strategic psyche. Iran is asking, are you willing to burn the world down over a passage fee? And they are betting the answer is no. The regional consequences will be immediate. The Gulf monarchies, particularly Saudi Arabia and the UAE, will find themselves in an impossible position. They rely on the Strait for their very survival. If Iran controls the Gate, then Iran controls their future. We will see an accelerated shift in their foreign policies as they move to accommodate Tehran. The Abraham Accords and other U.S.-led security frameworks will lose their teeth. Why look to Washington for protection when it is Tehran that decides whether your oil reaches the market? This is the reality of great power politics. It is not about who is right or who follows the law. It is about who has the power to stop the flow and who has the nerve to demand a price for letting it continue. The logistical impact will ripple through every layer of the global supply chain. This is not just about the price of gas at the pump in California. It is about the cost of plastic in Germany, the cost of fertilizer in Brazil, and the cost of electricity in Japan. Every increase in the friction of movement through the Strait of Hormuz is a tax on the global population. Iran is effectively seizing a portion of the world's GDP for itself. By doing so, they are building a war chest that is immune to Western sanctions. You cannot sanction a country when that country is the one collecting the taxes on your own energy supplies. It is a perfect circular logic of power. As we look toward the future, the map of the world is being redrawn before our eyes. The Strait of Hormuz is no longer a blue line on a map representing a free passage. It is becoming a solid wall, a sovereign barrier that marks the limit of Western influence and the rise of a new multipolar reality. Iran and Oman have recognized that the greatest power is the power to say no. By demanding a fee, they are saying no to the American century. They are saying no to the idea that the world's oceans belong to everyone. They are asserting that the Gate belongs to those who live by it and those who have the guns to guard it. This is the cold, hard logic of realism. Power is not granted, it is taken. And it is taken most effectively when it is disguised as something else, as a fee, as a regulation, as a sovereign right. The Tehran Tariff is the most significant challenge to maritime order in a generation. It exposes the vulnerability of a global system that relies on a single guarantor. It shows that in the clash between a high-tech Navy and high-leverage geography, geography usually wins. The world is about to find out exactly what the 21 miles of the Strait of Hormuz are worth. And the price, as Iran is making clear, is going to be much higher than anyone is prepared to pay. The question is no longer whether Iran can close the strait. The question is, now that they own the Gate, what will they demand next? The world has been focused on the threat of a sudden explosion, a catastrophic war that cuts off the oil. But the real danger is this: a slow, steady, and irreversible shift in the balance of power that leaves the West standing on the outside of the Gate, looking in while the keys are held by Tehran. The map hasn't changed, but its meaning has. The jugular has been seized, and the hand that holds it is not going to let go. This is the new architecture of power in the Middle East. It is cold, it is logical, and it is final.